You find yourself amidst a crowd of nobles, their eyes glued to the lavishly adorned chamber where Lucrezia Borgia, a name synonymous with intrigue and ambition, is about to be wed to Alfonso d'Este. The grandiose spectacle is more than just a union of two powerful families. It is a calculated political maneuver designed to silence past rumors and secure future alliances. The flickering candlelight dances across the faces of courtiers, their expressions a mixture of awe and scrutiny as they prepare to witness an event that will seal the fate of dynasties. The air is electric with anticipation, for tonight will not only mark a marriage but a performance, as Lucrezia is to consummate her union under the watchful gaze of those eager to dissect every intimate moment. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please, comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. In the bustling heart of Renaissance Rome, the year 1502 unfolds with a fervor unlike any other. The city, a labyrinth of cobblestone streets and towering domes, is alive with whispers and anticipation. It is the day of a wedding, but not merely a union of two souls. It is a grand spectacle where the threads of power, ambition, and legacy are tightly woven. The air is thick with the scent of incense and freshly cut flowers, mingling with the distant clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the murmur of gathered crowds. Rome, ever a stage for the mighty and the ambitious, holds its breath as the Borgia family prepares to cement another alliance. The setting is opulent beyond compare. Palatial halls draped in rich tapestries and gilded frescoes hold throngs of courtiers, nobles, and envoys from across Italy and beyond. Their eyes, sharp and calculating, flicker beneath heavy brows as they observe the unfolding drama. The grandeur is palpable. Silver candelabras flicker with dozens of candles, casting a golden glow upon the marble floors, polished to a mirror sheen. Servants in elaborate livery move silently, balancing trays laden with exotic fruits, spiced meats, and sweetmeats that glisten like jewels. Musicians seated in a raised gallery begin to play a lilting melody, a carefully chosen soundtrack for a day that is as much ceremony as it is strategy. Amidst this tableau of splendor, the wedding of Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este is the event that holds every eye and ear captive. Yet, beneath the surface of celebration lies a tension that crackles like static before a storm. This is not a marriage born of love or chance, but one meticulously crafted by the hands of patriarchs and power brokers. The corridors of the Vatican and the courts of Ferrara have been abuzz for weeks with speculation and maneuvering, for the union represents more than familial bonds. It is a chess move on the grand board of Italian politics. Lucrezia, the daughter of Pope Alexander VI, is at the center of this swirling vortex. At just 22, she stands poised and regal, her delicate features framed by cascades of dark hair that contrast sharply with the pale silk of her gown. Her expression is composed, almost serene, but her eyes betray a complex storm of emotions, anticipation, apprehension, and a quiet resolve. The daughter of one of the most notorious families in Christendom, she has long been acquainted with the burdens of expectation and the sharp edge of scandal. Her past marriages, fraught with intrigue and tragedy, have left their marks, but today she is adorned not only as a bride, but as a symbol of her family's enduring influence. Opposite her stands Alfonso d'Este, the heir to the Duchy of Ferrara, tall and imposing. His demeanor is a mixture of solemn duty and restrained excitement. His lineage is noble and ancient, steeped in the traditions of northern Italy's ruling elite. The alliance forged by this marriage promises to strengthen the Este hold on power, while simultaneously extending the reach of the Borgias beyond the walls of Rome. Alfonso's eyes meet Lucrezia's briefly, an unspoken understanding passing between them, a recognition of the roles they must play in this grand design. The atmosphere within the palazzo is charged with a peculiar kind of expectancy. Courtiers exchange furtive glances and whispered conversations, speculating on the implications of this union. Some view it as a masterstroke by Pope Alexander VI, a calculated effort to secure political alliances at a time when the papacy's influence is both potent and precarious. Others regard it with cynical eyes, aware that behind the glittering facade lie ambitions that could ignite rivalries and betrayals. The weight of history presses down on the assembled guests, for the Borgia's reputation is one of cunning and ruthlessness, their every move scrutinized within the volatile landscape of Renaissance Italy. As the ceremony unfolds, the grandeur of the occasion does little to mask the underlying currents of power. The chapel is resplendent, adorned with frescoes depicting saints and martyrs whose solemn gazes seem to judge the proceedings. The air is thick with the scent of burning candles and myrrh. The officiating cardinal intones prayers with measured solemnity, his voice rising and falling in the echoing nave. The congregation responds with reverence, though many eyes are fixed on the bride and groom, measuring their poise and composure. Outside the chapel, the city itself seems to pulse with the significance of the event. Marketplaces fall silent as merchants pause to listen to the bells tolling from the basilicas. Streets are lined with spectators eager to catch a glimpse of the procession that will soon wind its way through Rome's ancient thoroughfares. The union of Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este is not merely a private affair, but a public spectacle designed to broadcast power and influence to all who witness it. Within the palazzo, the guests prepare to witness the next phase of this political theatre. The wedding feast awaits, the culmination of the day's ceremonies and a carefully orchestrated display of wealth and alliance. Tables groan under the weight of delicacies, roasted peacocks adorned with fruit garnishes, platters of salted fish and fresh cheeses, and wine poured from ornate decanters that catch the candlelight like liquid rubies. The chatter of nobles and diplomats fills the air, punctuated by the clinking of glasses and the occasional burst of laughter, though beneath the surface, tension simmers. For Lucrezia, the day is a crucible. She moves through the crowd with grace, aware of every gaze and every whispered comment. The legacy of her family precedes her, the whispers of poison, betrayal, and whispered sins that cling like shadows. Yet she carries herself with a dignity that belies the storm within. This wedding is not just a contract, it is a performance where every smile and gesture is laden with meaning. The political stakes are immense. Pope Alexander VI's papacy, marked by both grandeur and controversy, depends on solidifying alliances that can withstand the shifting tides of Italian politics. The Borgia's enemies are many, and their power is as fragile as it is formidable. The marriage to Alfonso d'Este is a bold gambit, a bid to weave a network of loyalty and influence that spans the Italian peninsula. As the sun dips toward the horizon, casting long shadows across Rome's ancient stones, the city holds its breath for what the night will bring. The wedding of Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este is more than a celebration. It is an event that will ripple through the corridors of power, shaping destinies and redefining alliances. Behind the glittering facades and festive music lies a world where love is subordinate to strategy, and where every moment is a move in the relentless game of Renaissance politics. Thus, the stage is set. The players are in position, their roles defined by birth and ambition. In the heart of Rome, under the watchful eyes of gods and men, the story of Lucrezia Borgia's new chapter begins, not with the promise of romance, but with the weighty expectation of legacy and power. The city, ever a crucible of human drama, awaits the unfolding of a tale where personal and political realms collide, and where the wedding day is but the opening act in a saga that will reverberate through history. At the center of this grand spectacle, the figures of Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este emerge, not merely as bride and groom, but as embodiments of intricate political maneuvering and personal history, heavy with consequence. Their union is a carefully calculated alliance, a bond forged in the crucible of power rather than the warmth of affection. The corridors of the palazzo echo with hushed conversations about the stakes involved, and the guests, though masked with polite smiles, are keenly aware that this marriage carries implications far beyond the private lives of the couple. Lucrezia, the papal daughter, carries the weight of her family's infamous reputation with a complex mixture of grace and guarded resolve. At 22, she is no stranger to the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Her earlier marriages, each ending under clouds of scandal and tragedy, have left indelible marks on her reputation, marks that the Borgia family is desperate to erase or at least obscure. Her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza, a union dissolved amidst accusations of impotence and political betrayal, was a public humiliation that echoed through the courts of Italy. The second, to Alfonso of Aragon, ended in his violent and mysterious death, a shadow that still haunts her. Now, as she stands poised to wed Alfonso d'Este, the third husband in a series of politically charged alliances, the pressure to present a facade of legitimacy and strength is immense. Alfonso d'Este, heir to the Duchy of Ferrara, is no stranger to the machinations of power himself. Raised in a court renowned for its sophistication and political savvy, he understands that this marriage is as much an instrument of statecraft as a personal union. His demeanor is composed, yet beneath the surface lies the awareness that the alliance with the Borgias could either fortify his family's position or embroil them in the volatile intrigues that have long marked the papal house. Alfonso's role is not simply to claim a bride, but to navigate the treacherous waters of Borgia influence with caution and ambition. The story of Lucrezia's past marriages is a tale fraught with whispers and accusations, one that shadows the present ceremony with an uneasy tension. The dissolution of her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza was orchestrated with ruthless precision by her father, Pope Alexander VI, who sought to sever ties with a family no longer politically advantageous. The scandal surrounding Sforza's alleged impotence, a claim that was both weaponized and publicly humiliating, served as a justification for the annulment. This episode not only stripped Lucrezia of a husband, but cast a pall over her personal honor, a stigma that the Borgias have struggled to contain. Her second marriage to Alfonso of Aragon was marked by passionate alliance, but ended abruptly and violently. His assassination, widely believed to have been ordered by the Borgia patriarch himself, underscores the brutal calculus that governs this family's dealings. For Lucrezia, the loss was deeply personal, yet public discourse framed it as another chapter in the dangerous game of power that defined her lineage. The consequences of this union, and its tragic end, continue to ripple through the noble circles, coloring perceptions of Lucrezia's role and agency. Now, as she prepares to wed Alfonso d'Este, the urgency to prove the legitimacy and stability of this alliance is palpable. The Este family, aware of the Borgia family's notoriety and the controversies that trail Lucrezia, demands assurances. This is not a mere ceremonial union, it is a strategic move designed to consolidate power and silence detractors. The pressure to consummate the marriage publicly, to provide undeniable proof that the alliance is real and binding, hangs over the proceedings like a spectre. In the private chambers where Lucrezia prepares for the evening's rites, she is a study in controlled composure. Her attendants move quietly, adjusting the folds of her gown and arranging her dark hair with practiced care. Yet beneath the serene exterior, a storm of thoughts churns. She is acutely aware that this wedding is not just a moment of personal significance, but a public performance with stakes that reach far beyond her own desires. The need to demonstrate her fidelity, her womanhood, and her capacity to fulfill the role expected of her as a political bride is a burden she has borne before and must bear once more. Alfonso, meanwhile, contemplates the expectations placed upon him. His position as the future duke demands not only political acumen but also a willingness to engage in the rituals that affirm alliances. He understands that the consummation of this marriage, under the watchful eyes of witnesses, is a necessity not just for the Este family's honor but for the broader stability of the political landscape. The convergence of personal intimacy and public duty is a reality he accepts, though it strips the act of its privacy and transforms it into a spectacle. The guests at the wedding feast, while outwardly engaged in the festivities, the clinking of goblets, the laughter, and the exchange of pleasantries, are acutely attuned to the undercurrents. Noblemen and diplomats discuss the implications of the marriage in hushed tones, weighing the potential shifts in alliances and power balances. The Borgia family's reputation for cunning and ruthlessness is discussed openly, with some expressing admiration for their audacity, others wariness of their methods. The Este family's decision to join forces with the Borgias is seen by many as a gamble, a calculated risk in the ever-shifting game of Italian politics. Lucrezia's own place in this tableau is complex. While her youth and beauty are undeniable, they are overshadowed by the heavy legacy of her family's scandals. Yet, there is a quiet strength in her, an intelligence and resilience that those who know her recognize. She is not merely a passive participant in this marriage, but a woman keenly aware of the power dynamics at play and determined to navigate them with shrewdness. Her charm and wit have already begun to endear her to some members of the Este court, hinting at the possibility that she may transform her role from political pawn to influential duchess. This marriage, then, is a crucible where the personal and political collide. For Lucrezia and Alfonso, it is a union that demands the subjugation of private desires to public necessity. The history that precedes them adds a layer of complexity and weight, as both families watch closely for signs of strength, legitimacy, and alliance. The pressures borne by Lucrezia, in particular, are immense. Her past is a shadow she cannot escape, and her future depends on her ability to embody the ideal bride and political partner. As the evening progresses, the formalities of the wedding feast give way to the quiet anticipation of the consummation. It is a moment fraught with significance, one that will be scrutinized not just by their families, but by the political entities invested in the outcome. The need to affirm the marriage's validity is paramount, a demand that reduces what should be an intimate act to a public performance. This requirement, dictated by the Este family's desire to quell rumors and solidify the alliance, underscores the extent to which personal lives are sacrificed on the altar of political ambition. Lucrezia, despite the weight of her past and the gaze of the court, approaches this moment with a mixture of resignation and resolve. She understands that her role is to serve as a symbol of unity and strength, to demonstrate that the Borgia name can endure beyond scandal and tragedy. Alfonso, too, prepares himself to fulfill his role in this elaborate dance of power, recognizing that personal vulnerability must be set aside in favor of duty. In this charged atmosphere, the story of Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este moves beyond the private and the personal, becoming a narrative of political calculation, family legacy, and the complex interplay of power and identity. Their marriage is a testament to the ruthless pragmatism of Renaissance politics, where alliances are forged not in the fires of passion, but in the cold calculus of survival and dominance. Yet within this framework, the individuals at the center of the union carry their own hopes, fears, and ambitions, weaving a story that is as human as it is historic. As twilight deepened over Rome, the grandeur of the day's celebrations gave way to a ritual both intimate and disturbingly public. The wedding night of Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este, far from a private consummation, was to be a spectacle witnessed by a select assembly of courtiers and clerics, a tradition that stripped the sacredness of marriage's first union and transformed it into a display of political theatre. The very walls of the palazzo, which had echoed with laughter and music hours before, now bore silent witness to an act shrouded in tension, expectation, and humiliation. This bizarre custom, rooted in the exigencies of Renaissance power politics, demanded that the consummation be observed to silence any doubts about the legitimacy of the marriage. In a society where bloodlines determined power, inheritance, and alliance, the proof of a union's validity was not left to private trust but enforced through public verification. The Este family, wary of the Borgia reputation and the scandals that clung to Lucrezia like shadows, insisted on this grotesque requirement. It was a chilling reminder that personal intimacy was subordinate to political necessity, a transaction performed under the scrutinizing eyes of witnesses. The chamber prepared for the consummation was austere, its rich tapestries and velvet draperies muted in the flickering candlelight. Servants and attendants moved silently, their faces averted or fixed in polite neutrality, aware of the delicate balance between duty and discretion. Priests, summoned to serve as impartial witnesses, took their places with solemn faces, their presence lending a veneer of sanctity to what was essentially a proof of physical consummation. The tension in the room was palpable, a heavy silence broken only by the hushed murmurs of those assembled. Lucrezia entered the chamber with measured steps, her usual composure strained beneath the weight of this public ordeal. The silk of her gown rustled softly, a fragile barrier against the vulnerability she was about to endure. Her eyes, dark and reflective, flickered with a mixture of resignation, defiance, and a quiet sorrow. She was acutely aware that this moment would be dissected, discussed, and weaponized by those who sought to control her fate, and that of her family. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a steely resolve, a recognition that to survive and assert her place, she must endure this humiliation. Alfonso followed, his demeanor a complex mix of duty and discomfort. While bound by the expectations of his family and position, he was not immune to the absurdity of the ritual. The presence of witnesses during such an intimate act violated the sanctity of marriage and personal dignity, but in the ruthless world of Renaissance politics, personal feelings were secondary to the game of power. Alfonso's gaze met Lucrezia's briefly, a silent communication passing between them, a shared understanding of the ordeal imposed upon them both. The act itself was orchestrated with chilling precision. The witnesses, including priests and senior courtiers, maintained a strict vigil, their eyes trained on the couple as if physical proof could be extracted from the most private of moments. The consummation was reportedly repeated 3 times, a grotesque insistence designed to leave no room for doubt or rumor. Each time, the boundaries between intimacy and spectacle blurred further, the personal reduced to performance, the sacred to political instrument. For Lucrezia, the experience was a profound violation, a stripping away of privacy and agency. The marriage bed, a space traditionally reserved for tender union, was transformed into a stage where her body became a tool of political legitimacy. The humiliation was acute, yet she bore it with a dignity that masked the inner turmoil. Her resilience in the face of such degradation was a testament to her strength, cultivated in a life where power and survival were inseparable. The presence of witnesses, particularly priests, added a layer of religious and social weight to the proceedings. Their role was not only to attest to the consummation, but to sanctify the act in the eyes of God and society, intertwining the spiritual with the political. This fusion underscored the era's complex relationship between church and state, where personal lives were ensnared in the web of power and doctrine. The ritual's grotesqueness lay in its intrusion into the most private aspects of human experience, turning them into tools of statecraft. Outside the chamber, rumors and speculation swirled among the court. The very necessity of such a public consummation fed the gossip mills, with courtiers and diplomats eagerly exchanging accounts and interpretations. The Borgia name, already steeped in scandal, became the subject of renewed whispers, questions about Lucrezia's virtue, her capacity to fulfill her role as wife and political partner, and the implications for the alliance with the Este family. The ritual, intended to quell doubts, paradoxically stoked the fires of intrigue. Yet, amid the spectacle and scrutiny, Lucrezia's response was not one of victimhood, but of calculated endurance. She understood that this humiliation was a price she had to pay in the pursuit of power and security. Her youth and beauty, once vulnerabilities, became instruments she wielded with increasing skill. The act of consummation, though stripped of intimacy, was a necessary affirmation of her position, a public declaration that she was capable of fulfilling her role as wife, mother, and political actor. Alfonso's role, too, was defined by this ritualistic performance. His participation was both a personal obligation and a public statement of his commitment to the alliance. The eyes of his family and court bore down on him, demanding not only proof of consummation, but assurance that the Este lineage would continue untainted. The repetition of the act 3 times was as much a demonstration of his virility and strength as it was a political necessity, a spectacle of masculine power in service to family honor. The implications of this public consummation extended beyond the immediate moment. It was a clear message to rival factions and potential adversaries that the Borgia-Este alliance was real, binding, and capable of producing heirs to secure their intertwined futures. In an age where legitimacy was paramount, and rumors could topple dynasties, the ritual served as a defensive bulwark against dissent. Yet, it exacted a personal cost on those involved, particularly Lucrezia, whose body became a contested site of power and control. This night, marked by its bizarre and invasive tradition, encapsulated the paradox of Renaissance politics, where the boundaries between the personal and political were not just blurred, but deliberately erased. The intimate was made public, and individual agency was subsumed under the demands of family, alliance, and survival. Lucrezia's consummation, witnessed and verified, was less about passion and more about performance, less about union and more about affirmation. Despite the humiliation, Lucrezia's resilience was unmistakable. The ritual, designed to reduce her to a mere instrument of political necessity, instead became a crucible forging her strength. She endured not just for herself, but for the legacy she was to build within the Este court. The wedding night, a spectacle of intrusion and exposure, transformed into a testament of her capacity to navigate the ruthless world she inhabited. As dawn approached and the witnesses withdrew, the silence that settled over the chamber was heavy with unspoken understanding. The act had been completed, the alliance publicly sealed in a manner that left no room for doubt. Yet beneath the surface, the complexities of power, identity, and survival continued to churn. The wedding night, far from a private beginning, was a public declaration, a moment where intimacy was sacrificed at the altar of politics, and where Lucrezia Borgia's resilience began to carve new paths through the treacherous landscape of Renaissance Italy. The Borgia family's name, whispered with equal parts awe and dread throughout Renaissance Italy, was a mantle heavy with infamy and ambition. Their reputation for cunning, ruthlessness, and political maneuvering was not mere rumor, but the product of calculated and often brutal strategies that had propelled them to the pinnacle of power. In the labyrinthine corridors of the Vatican and the courts of Italy, the Borgias had carved a legacy as masters of intrigue, a family whose every move was scrutinized and whose alliances were both coveted and feared. Pope Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, was the architect of much of this formidable reputation. His papacy, marked by unprecedented displays of wealth and influence, was also shadowed by accusations of simony, nepotism, and even poison. The Pope's vision was clear: to elevate his family above all others, to weave a network of power that spanned the Italian peninsula and beyond. Marriage was one of his most potent tools in this endeavor, a means to secure political alliances, consolidate territories, and legitimize the Borgia name in a world where lineage was paramount. Lucrezia Borgia, as one of his most visible instruments, embodied the intersection of family ambition and personal sacrifice. Her marriages were not born of love but of strategy, each alliance a calculated move in a broader game of dominance. The dissolution of her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza was orchestrated with ruthless precision. To sever ties with a family no longer advantageous, Pope Alexander VI did not hesitate to employ scandal. Accusations of impotence leveled at Sforza served not only to annul the marriage, but to publicly humiliate his former son-in-law. This event, while politically expedient, left Lucrezia's reputation tarnished, a shadow she would carry into subsequent unions. Her second marriage, to Alfonso of Aragon, was intended to solidify the Borgia foothold in Naples, but it ended in tragedy and suspicion. Alfonso's murder, believed by many to have been sanctioned by the Pope himself, was a stark reminder of the brutal lengths to which the Borgias would go to protect and expand their power. For Lucrezia, these events were both deeply personal and inseparable from the ruthless political calculus that governed her life. Each marriage was a thread in the intricate tapestry of Borgia strategy, woven with equal parts ambition and danger. The decision to marry Lucrezia to Alfonso d'Este was yet another masterstroke in this ongoing campaign. The Este family, rulers of Ferrara, were esteemed nobles with a proud lineage and a court renowned for its cultural sophistication. This alliance promised mutual benefit. The Este would gain the favor of the papal house, while the Borgias would extend their influence into northern Italy, creating a network of loyalty that could withstand the vicissitudes of Italian politics. Yet, this union also carried risks, for the Este were wary of the Borgia reputation and demanded assurances that the marriage would be legitimate and enduring. Within this context, the public consummation of the marriage took on profound significance. It was not merely a ceremony but a political act, designed to silence rumors and solidify the alliance. The Este family's insistence on witnesses was a grotesque but necessary measure to ensure that no question could arise about the validity of the union or the capacity of Lucrezia to fulfill her role as wife and mother. The act of consummation, stripped of privacy and transformed into spectacle, was a reflection of the era's intertwining of personal life and political necessity. The Borgia family's approach to marriage was emblematic of their broader strategy. Personal relationships were instruments of power, to be used, discarded, or manipulated as circumstances demanded. Lucrezia, while often portrayed as a pawn, was also a participant in this game. Her intelligence and adaptability allowed her to navigate the dangerous currents that surrounded her, even as she was bound by the expectations and machinations of her family. The alliances forged through her marriages were not simply contracts but battlegrounds where influence was contested and negotiated. The scandal that followed Lucrezia's previous marriages did not deter Pope Alexander VI from pressing forward with this new alliance. Instead, it underscored the urgency of securing legitimacy and strength through the union with Alfonso d'Este. The political stakes were immense. The Borgias faced rivals who sought to undermine their power, and the papal state itself was a fragile construct, vulnerable to both internal dissent and external threats. The marriage was a declaration of resilience, a statement that the Borgia name, despite its tarnished reputation, remained a force to be reckoned with. Within the Este court, Lucrezia's arrival was met with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and cautious optimism. The court was a center of art, music, and learning, a stark contrast to the often violent and scandal-ridden environment of Rome. Here Lucrezia had the opportunity to reinvent herself, to craft a new identity beyond the shadow of her family's notoriety. Yet the legacy of the Borgias was not easily escaped. The whispers that followed her were persistent, and the pressure to prove her virtue and loyalty was unrelenting. The family dynamics that shaped Lucrezia's life were complex and fraught with tension. Pope Alexander VI's ambition propelled the family forward, but it also sowed discord and danger. His sons, César and Juan, were formidable players in their own right, their actions often blurring the lines between loyalty and rivalry. Lucrezia's position, as the daughter and sister within this volatile mix, required a delicate balance of obedience, cunning, and resilience. Her marriages were less about personal happiness and more about survival and influence within a family whose power was built on both charisma and fear. The public nature of the consummation ritual, as demanded by the Este, was a manifestation of these family dynamics writ large. It was a means to assert control, to verify allegiance, and to publicly bind Lucrezia to her new role. This intrusion into the private sphere was a stark illustration of how the Borgias' personal lives were inseparable from their political ambitions. The consummation was not simply a marital rite, but a spectacle of power, a demonstration that the Borgia legacy was not only enduring but adaptable. In this light, the marriage of Lucrezia Borgia to Alfonso d'Este was more than a union of two individuals. It was a strategic alliance forged in the crucible of Renaissance politics and family intrigue. It encapsulated the complexities of a time when personal identity was often subsumed by the demands of power, and where the boundaries between love, duty, and survival were blurred beyond recognition. The Borgia family's legacy, marked by scandal and ambition, set the stage for Lucrezia's transformation from a pawn in a deadly game to a figure of influence and resilience within the courts of Ferrara. The consummation of Lucrezia Borgia's marriage to Alfonso d'Este was no ordinary union but a calculated spectacle designed to silence whispers and fortify political bonds. The requirement that the act be witnessed not once but 3 separate times was a grotesque yet deliberate measure imposed by the Este family, a theatrical proof meant to erase any lingering doubts about Lucrezia's virtue and the legitimacy of the alliance. This public ritual transformed a deeply private act into a staged performance, where the stakes were not merely personal but political, and the audience was composed of priests and courtiers whose vigilance was as much about power as propriety. The first consummation was marked by an oppressive silence that filled the chamber, broken only by the faint rustle of silk and the muted breaths of those assembled. The witnesses, a solemn assembly of ecclesiastical figures and nobles, observed with stern faces, their eyes unyielding as they bore witness to a moment that was both intimate and invasive. Their presence was a stark reminder that in the ruthless game of Renaissance politics, trust was scarce and proof was demanded in the most invasive forms. The act, usually veiled in privacy and tenderness, was here stripped to its barest essentials, physical evidence of union, devoid of affection or discretion. When the first act concluded, the tension in the room did not dissipate. Instead, the insistence on repeating the consummation 2 more times revealed the extent to which the Este family was determined to quash any rumors that might undermine their new alliance. Each repetition was a reaffirmation, a ritualistic assertion that the marriage was genuine, binding, and capable of producing heirs. The act's repetition was not about passion or connection but about political certainty, a grotesque performance designed to fortify the fragile edifice of trust between two powerful houses. For Lucrezia, the ordeal was a profound violation of privacy and dignity. To have her body scrutinized and her most intimate moments made public was a humiliation few could endure with such composure. Yet she bore the ritual with a resilience forged through years of navigating the treacherous waters of her family's ambitions and scandals. The act became not a moment of submission, but one of endurance, a testament to her ability to survive and assert herself, even in the most demeaning circumstances. Each repetition carved her strength deeper, transforming humiliation into a weapon of quiet defiance. Afonso's position was equally fraught. As heir to the Duchy of Ferrara, his duty was to secure the alliance not only through political agreement, but through proof of consummated union. The repeated consummations were a public declaration of his virility and commitment, a performance that affirmed his role as husband and future duke. Yet beneath the veneer of duty there was an understanding of the absurdity and cruelty of the demand, a recognition that the most private moments of intimacy had been weaponized in a display of power and control. The witnesses played a critical role in this ritual, their presence lending an official stamp to what was essentially a political necessity disguised as marital proof. Priests, entrusted with the spiritual well-being of the union, found themselves complicit in a spectacle that blurred the lines between sacred rites and political expediency. Their solemn oaths to bear witness were intertwined with the machinations of power, illustrating the complex relationship between church authority and secular ambition in Renaissance Italy. The courtyard of faith was thus co-opted into the theatre of political legitimacy. The repetition of the consummation 3 times was a deliberate choice steeped in symbolism and practicality. In an era where rumors could destabilize dynasties and annulments could be weaponized, such thorough proof was deemed essential. The number 3, often associated with religious significance, lent a veneer of sanctity to the otherwise invasive demand. It was an unyielding assertion that no doubt could remain, no whisper about impotence or non-consummation could survive the rigorous scrutiny imposed by the Este family. The public nature of this consummation ritual reverberated beyond the chamber walls. Courtiers and diplomats, privy to the details, or at least the knowledge of the event, speculated on its implications. The Borgia name, already mired in scandal, was once again the subject of intense gossip. Yet, paradoxically, the ritual served to silence the most damaging rumors by providing incontrovertible evidence of the marriage's legitimacy. It was a calculated risk, exposing intimacy to public gaze, but securing political advantage in return. Within the Este court, the successful completion of this ritual was hailed as a victory. It reinforced the alliance, and sent a clear message to rival houses that the Borgias were not only powerful but capable of binding their agreements with public, undeniable proof. The spectacle, though humiliating, became a tool of power, a symbol of the Este family's vigilance and the Borgias' resilience. It was a moment where personal sacrifice translated directly into political capital. For Lucrezia, the experience was a crucible of transformation. The repeated public consummations, while dehumanizing, also marked the beginning of her emergence from scandal into a role of influence and authority. The ritual underscored the harsh realities faced by women of noble birth, whose bodies were battlegrounds for family ambition and political strategy. Yet, Lucrezia's endurance and grace under such scrutiny hinted at a formidable spirit, one that would navigate the complexities of her new court with increasing confidence and agency. Alfonso, too, found in this ritual a reaffirmation of his role, not only as husband, but as a political actor. His participation in the public consummation was both a personal and dynastic statement, reinforcing his commitment to the alliance and his capacity to continue the Este lineage. The act was a performance of masculinity and loyalty, a declaration to his family and allies that the union was solid and unassailable. The wedding night, transformed into a public event of consummation witnessed thrice over, encapsulated the paradox of Renaissance noble life, where the boundaries between private and public, intimate and political, were relentlessly blurred. The spectacle was a stark reminder that in this world, personal dignity was often sacrificed on the altar of power, and that marriage, far from a union of hearts, was a strategic enterprise demanding proof and performance. Yet within this grim theatre, Lucrezia's strength shone through. The humiliation imposed by the ritual did not break her but refined her, forging a resilience that would serve her in the turbulent years ahead. The consummation, witnessed and repeated, was not merely a grotesque obligation but a rite of passage into a new chapter of power and influence. It was a moment where the personal became political, and where Lucrezia Borgia began to rewrite her story, not as a victim of circumstance, but as a woman who could master the cruel demands of her time. Thus, the public consummation, repeated 3 times, observed by many, stood as a testament to the unyielding intersection of intimacy and politics in Renaissance Italy. It was a spectacle of power, a demonstration of alliance, and a crucible of personal endurance, setting the stage for the complex and compelling life that lay ahead for Lucrezia Borgia within the court of Ferrara. In the days and months that followed the public consummation, Lucrezia Borgia began to shed the fragile guise of a scandal-tainted bride and emerge as a commanding presence within the Este court of Ferrara. The humiliations of her wedding night, though seared into her memory, became less an anchor of shame and more a foundation upon which she built a new identity, one shaped by resilience, intelligence, and a keen understanding of the intricate dance of power. The young Duchess, once perceived as a pawn in her family's relentless game, was gradually recognized as a shrewd player in her own right. The court of Ferrara, with its elegant salons, vibrant artistic patronage, and sophisticated political milieu, provided Lucrezia with a stage far different from the tumultuous streets of Rome. Here, amidst the cultured elite and learned scholars, she found opportunities to cultivate relationships and assert influence. Her charm, wit, and education endeared her to courtiers and diplomats alike, turning whispers of scandal into admiration for her poise and grace. Lucrezia was no longer merely the Pope's daughter. She was becoming a duchess who commanded respect on her own terms. This transformation was neither swift nor without struggle. The shadow of her family's notorious reputation lingered, and the memory of her past marriages cast long doubts among some factions within Ferrara. Yet Lucrezia met these challenges with a blend of strategic generosity and calculated distance. She hosted salons that became hubs of intellectual discourse, inviting poets, philosophers, and artists to gather under her patronage. These gatherings were as much about cultural cultivation as they were about forging alliances and asserting her place in the court's hierarchy. Her engagement with the arts was particularly significant. Lucrezia's patronage extended to commissioning works that celebrated the Este family's legacy and reinforced the legitimacy of her own position. Through these acts, she subtly shifted the narrative from scandal to sophistication, aligning herself with the humanist ideals that defined the Renaissance. The lavish tapestries, paintings, and musical compositions sponsored by the Duchess were not mere displays of wealth but deliberate acts of political theatre, symbols of power, refinement, and enduring influence. Lucrezia's ability to navigate the treacherous currents of Ferrara's political landscape was further evidenced in her interactions with key figures at court. She cultivated alliances with influential nobles and diplomats, leveraging her unique position as a bridge between the papal power and the Este dynasty. Her correspondence reveals a woman deeply involved in the machinations of diplomacy, aware of the delicate balances required to maintain favor and secure her family's interests. Through her letters and personal interventions, she shaped policies and mediated conflicts, demonstrating an astuteness that belied her youth. Motherhood, too, became an integral aspect of Lucrezia's evolving identity and power. Bearing children was not only a societal expectation but a political imperative, ensuring the continuity of the Estes line and the stability of the alliance. Her pregnancies and the births of her offspring were celebrated events, reinforcing her role as Duchess and consolidating her influence within Ferrara. The children she bore became living symbols of the union between two powerful houses, tangible evidence of the alliance's success and longevity. Yet, beneath the surface of public triumph, Lucrezia grappled with the complexities of her personal history. The scars of her earlier marriages, the betrayals, losses, and public humiliations were wounds that time could not fully heal. Her resilience was not born of oblivion, but of an acute awareness of her vulnerabilities and a determination to transform them into strength. The very intimacy that had once been weaponized against her became a source of empowerment as she reclaimed her narrative and redefined her role within the court. This duality of experience, public power and private struggle, infused Lucrezia's character with depth and nuance. She was a woman shaped by the harsh realities of Renaissance politics, yet capable of transcending them through intelligence and will. Her presence at court challenged simplistic narratives of victimhood, revealing instead a figure who actively shaped her destiny within the constraints imposed upon her. Lucrezia's evolution from a bride subjected to public scrutiny to a duchess wielding influence was a testament to her adaptability and strength. The Este court, recognizing her growing stature, increasingly valued Lucrezia not just as a political alliance, but as a cultural and diplomatic asset. Her patronage attracted renowned artists and thinkers, enhancing Ferrara's reputation as a center of Renaissance culture. Her salons became venues where ideas flourished, and political alliances were forged in the subtle exchange of conversation and art. Through these activities, Lucrezia positioned herself at the heart of the court's social and political life, weaving networks that extended beyond Ferrara's walls. Her husband, Alfonso d'Este, played a complementary role in this partnership. While he maintained his duties as heir and later duke, Alfonso's support of Lucrezia's initiatives helped solidify her influence. Together, they navigated the challenges of ruling and alliance building, their union evolving from a political convenience into a partnership marked by mutual respect and shared ambition. This dynamic further enhanced Lucrezia's capacity to effect change and assert authority within the court. The transformation of Lucrezia's reputation also had broader implications. As whispers of scandal faded, replaced by admiration for her patronage and diplomatic skill, she became a model of Renaissance womanhood, educated, cultured, and politically engaged. Her story challenged prevailing notions about women's roles and capacities in a male-dominated society, illustrating the possibilities for female agency amidst constraints. Lucrezia's life in Ferrara thus resonated beyond her immediate context, influencing perceptions of gender, power, and identity in the Renaissance. In the crucible of Ferrara's court, Lucrezia Borgia's resilience crystallized into a formidable force. The humiliations of her wedding night and the shadows of her past did not define her, rather they were the furnace through which her strength was tempered. She emerged not as a victim of circumstance, but as a duchess who commanded respect, wielded influence, and shaped the cultural and political life of her adopted city. Her journey from scandal to empowerment was emblematic of the complex interplay between personal endurance and political acumen in Renaissance Italy. Through salons and patronage, diplomacy and motherhood, Lucrezia carved a space for herself that transcended the limitations imposed by her birth and history. Her ability to reinvent and assert herself within the Este court marked a turning point, not only in her own life, but in the narrative of a family often dismissed as mere players in the ruthless game of papal politics. Lucrezia's transformation was a testament to the power of resilience, intelligence, and strategic grace in a world where every move was fraught with peril and possibility. In the refined courts of Ferrara, Lucrezia Borgia's rise to influence was as much a triumph of cultural patronage as it was of political acumen. The Duchess understood that power in Renaissance Italy was not solely wielded through force or lineage, but equally through the subtle arts of diplomacy, intellectual engagement, and the cultivation of beauty. Her salons, resplendent gatherings of poets, philosophers, artists, and diplomats, became crucibles where culture and politics mingled, offering her a platform to reshape her image and consolidate her authority. The salons were more than social occasions. They were carefully orchestrated events that allowed Lucrezia to project sophistication and command respect. Within these spaces, conversation flowed freely, debates on philosophy, discussions of poetry, and the exchange of political ideas unfolded against a backdrop of music and art. The Duchess, seated at the center, was both hostess and participant, her wit and intelligence drawing admiration and fostering alliances. Here, the whispers of her past faded into the background, replaced by the vibrant energy of Renaissance humanism she so skillfully embodied. Lucrezia's patronage of the arts was a deliberate and strategic endeavor. She commissioned works that celebrated the Este family's heritage, intertwining her own narrative with that of her new home. Paintings, sculptures, and musical compositions flourished under her auspices, each piece a testament to the flourishing culture of Ferrara and a symbol of the Duchess's refined taste and political savvy. These artistic endeavors were not mere vanity projects, but instruments of influence, signaling to allies and rivals alike the strength and legitimacy of her position. Through her cultivation of culture, Lucrezia also navigated the complex web of Renaissance politics. The court of Ferrara was a nexus of power, where alliances were forged and broken amidst the exchange of ideas and favors. By hosting salons and patronizing artists and scholars, she created a network of loyalty and influence that extended beyond the palace walls. Diplomats and nobles, drawn to the Duchess's court, found themselves enmeshed in a cultural and political milieu that elevated Ferrara's status and bolstered the Este family's standing. This cultural patronage dovetailed with Lucrezia's diplomatic efforts. She engaged in correspondence and negotiations that revealed a keen understanding of the shifting allegiances and power dynamics of Italian states. Her letters, filled with subtlety and insight, show a woman deeply involved in the machinations of politics, capable of leveraging her position to secure advantages for her family and allies. Through these actions, Lucrezia transcended the traditional role of a noblewoman, asserting herself as an active political agent. Lucrezia's salons also served as a stage for gendered negotiation of power. In a society where women's public roles were limited, the salon provided a space where she could wield influence indirectly yet effectively. By curating the intellectual and artistic life of the court, she shaped discourse and opinion, guiding the court's cultural and political direction. This form of soft power allowed her to navigate the constraints imposed by her gender and family history, turning potential vulnerabilities into strengths. The Duchess's cultural patronage and diplomatic engagement were intertwined with her personal aspirations and survival strategies. The legacy of the Borgia name, fraught with scandal and rumor, necessitated a reinvention not only for Lucrezia herself, but for the family's standing in this new context. By aligning herself with the ideals of Renaissance humanism and cultivating an image of refined sophistication, she distanced herself from past controversies and projected an aura of legitimacy and grace. This redefinition of identity was also reflected in her approach to motherhood and family. Lucrezia's children became symbols not only of dynastic continuity, but of the successful merging of Borgia and Este legacies. Their education and upbringing were infused with the same cultural and intellectual values she championed in her salons. Through her role as mother, she reinforced the political and cultural project she had undertaken, ensuring that her influence would extend into the next generation. Yet, beneath the polished surface of cultural patronage and diplomacy, Lucrezia remained acutely aware of the precariousness of her position. The court was rife with intrigue, and alliances were as fragile as they were vital. Her ability to maintain favor required constant vigilance and adaptability. The very culture she cultivated was a double-edged sword. While it elevated her status, it also exposed her to envy and suspicion. Navigating these risks demanded a delicate balance of charm, intelligence, and political savvy. Lucrezia's transformation from a woman burdened by her family's notoriety into a celebrated patron and political actor was emblematic of the broader currents of the Renaissance. Her life illustrated how culture and politics were deeply intertwined, and how power could be exercised through the patronage of art and the cultivation of intellectual communities. In this way, she not only shaped her own destiny, but also contributed to the cultural flowering of Ferrara, leaving a legacy that transcended the scandals of her youth. Her salons became legendary, attracting some of the era's most brilliant minds and artists. Figures like the poet Tasso and the painter Dosso Dossi found patronage under her roof, their works reflecting the sophisticated environment she nurtured. Through these relationships, Lucrezia forged connections that enhanced Ferrara's prestige and her own influence. The court's reputation as a center of artistic and intellectual excellence was in no small part due to her vision and tenacity. Moreover, Lucrezia's diplomatic endeavors extended beyond the borders of Ferrara. Her correspondence reveals connections with courts across Italy and Europe, positioning her as a key player in the web of alliances that defined Renaissance politics. She skillfully used cultural diplomacy to complement political negotiations, understanding that the arts could serve as a language of power and persuasion. This holistic approach to influence was a hallmark of her tenure as Duchess. The intertwining of culture and politics under Lucrezia's guidance reshaped Ferrara's identity. The court became a beacon of Renaissance ideals, where humanist thought and artistic innovation flourished alongside political strategy. Lucrezia's role in this transformation challenged contemporary assumptions about the limits of female power, demonstrating that influence could be wielded through intellect, taste, and patronage as effectively as through force or birthright. In this vibrant milieu, Lucrezia Borgia redefined not only her own narrative, but also the possibilities for women in the Renaissance. Her salons were crucibles of power, where culture became a tool for political maneuvering and personal agency. Through these efforts, she carved a lasting place for herself in the history of Ferrara and the broader tapestry of Italian Renaissance politics and culture, embodying the complex interplay between art, diplomacy, and power that defined her era. As the years unfolded within the gilded walls of Ferrara's court, Lucrezia Borgia's life became a tapestry woven with triumphs and trials, her public persona an intricate dance between power and vulnerability. The Duchess, who had once been the subject of scandal and whispered suspicion, evolved into a figure embodying both the burdens and privileges of her station. Behind the grandeur of her patronage and diplomacy lay a woman navigating the complex interplay of personal struggle and political expectation. Lucrezia's position as Duchess demanded a constant balancing act. She was a mother, a wife, a patron of the arts, and a political actor, all roles that required deft navigation of courtly intrigue and external pressures. Her children, symbols of dynastic continuity, brought joy yet also intensified the scrutiny she faced. Each birth was celebrated, not only as a personal milestone, but as a political event reinforcing the alliance between the Borgias and the Estes. The weight of expectation bore heavily upon her shoulders, a reminder that her legacy was inextricably tied to her ability to produce heirs and secure the family line. Yet motherhood was also a source of personal fulfillment and strength. Lucrezia invested deeply in the education and upbringing of her children, ensuring they were steeped in the humanist ideals she championed. Through them, she sought to extend her influence into the future, shaping the next generation to embody the values and ambitions that defined her tenure as Duchess. Her maternal role was thus both intimate and strategic, a fusion of affection and political foresight. Despite her successes, Lucrezia's life was not devoid of hardship. The scars of her past, the betrayals, the public humiliations, the loss of previous husbands, lingered beneath the surface, shaping her worldview and informing her actions. The shadow of the Borgia name, while softened by her efforts, never fully receded. Rival factions and courtly enemies seized upon any opportunity to undermine her, reminding her that power was as precarious as it was coveted. The delicate alliances she forged required constant vigilance, and the court of Ferrara was a place where loyalty was often fleeting. Her husband, Alfonso d'Este, shared in the challenges of their rule. Together, they faced political threats both internal and external, navigating the complex landscape of Italian politics with a combination of diplomacy and resolve. Their partnership, once a strategic alliance, matured into a bond marked by mutual respect and shared purpose. Yet even this relationship was tested by the relentless demands of their positions, the expectations of heirs, and the ever-present shadow of the Borgia legacy. Amidst these pressures, Lucrezia's patronage of the arts and culture remained a cornerstone of her influence. The court continued to flourish as a hub of artistic innovation and intellectual discourse, attracting luminaries whose works enhanced Ferrara's prestige. Through cultural patronage, Lucrezia asserted a form of soft power that complemented her political activities, reinforcing her status and shaping the court's identity. This dual strategy of cultural and political engagement was a hallmark of her leadership. However, the interplay between her public achievements and private struggles highlighted the paradox of her existence. The very visibility that brought her power also exposed her to scrutiny and criticism. Her personal life, once carefully guarded, became fodder for gossip and political maneuvering. The The tensions between her past and present, between family loyalty and individual agency, created a complex portrait of a woman striving to define herself amid competing demands. Lucrezia's resilience was tested repeatedly by illness and loss. The toll of childbirth and the fragility of health in the Renaissance era meant that she faced repeated physical challenges. The deaths of children or close relatives struck deep wounds, reminding her of the impermanence of life and the fragility of the legacies she sought to build. These personal tragedies, while private, echoed through the public sphere, influencing the dynamics of court and family. The Duchess also grappled with the moral ambiguities of her position. The Borgia family's notorious reputation for intrigue and ruthlessness cast a long shadow, and Lucrezia was often caught between loyalty to her birth family and her adopted home. Navigating these loyalties required a keen sense of diplomacy and discretion, as well as an ability to reconcile conflicting identities. Her efforts to distance herself from the darker aspects of her family's history were met with varying degrees of success, reflecting the enduring complexity of her legacy. Throughout her life in Ferrara, Lucrezia cultivated a careful image, one of dignity, intelligence, and grace, that countered the more lurid tales of her youth. She became a patroness, not only of the arts but of social causes and charitable works, enhancing her reputation and strengthening her ties to the court and its people. These acts of public benevolence were both genuine expressions of compassion and strategic moves to solidify her standing. The marriage bed that had once been a stage for public humiliation transformed over time into a symbol of Lucrezia's authority and resilience. Her role as Duchess allowed her to reclaim intimacy on her own terms, forging partnerships that balanced affection and political necessity. The personal became intertwined with the political in ways that defined her legacy and influenced the court's culture. As her life unfolded, Lucrezia's story became emblematic of the Renaissance woman's paradox, caught between the demands of public power and private vulnerability, navigating a world where gender and family legacy shaped every opportunity and constraint. Her ability to endure, adapt, and influence within these confines marked her as a figure of remarkable complexity and strength. The legacy she forged was neither simple nor unblemished. It was a tapestry of cultural patronage, political maneuvering, personal sacrifice, and resilience. Lucrezia Borgia's life in Ferrara was a testament to the enduring interplay of power, identity, and survival in a turbulent era. Her story reflected the broader tensions of Renaissance Italy, where the ambitions of families and individuals collided with the inexorable forces of history and human frailty. In the end, Lucrezia's journey was one of transformation, from a woman burdened by scandal and political machination to a duchess who wielded influence with intelligence and grace. Her legacy was shaped by the contradictions she embodied and the choices she made, leaving an indelible mark on the courts of Ferrara and the annals of Renaissance history. Time, with its relentless passage, gradually reshaped the legacy of Lucrezia Borgia, from that of a mere pawn in the ruthless games of Renaissance dynasties into a figure of formidable influence and nuance. The narrative that once cast her solely as the scandalous daughter of Pope Alexander VI evolved into a complex portrait of resilience, diplomacy, and cultural patronage. Her life, interwoven with the tumultuous history of Italy's courts and the shadowy intrigues of her family, became a testament to the capacity of a woman to reclaim and redefine her story amid forces that sought to confine and diminish her. Lucrezia's early years, marked by public humiliation and suspicion, had threatened to define her forever. The whispered accusations surrounding her first marriage, the tragic and violent end of her second husband, and the grotesque spectacle of her wedding night consummation with Alfonso d'Este cast long shadows over her reputation. Yet, through sheer determination and intelligence, she transformed these vulnerabilities into sources of strength. The humiliations she endured were not endpoints but crucibles in which her character was forged anew. Within the refined courts of Ferrara, Lucrezia cultivated a persona that transcended the scandals of her youth. Her patronage of the arts, from sponsoring painters and poets to fostering intellectual salons, reshaped not only her image but also the cultural landscape of the city. Her court became a beacon of Renaissance humanism, where art and diplomacy intertwined to elevate Ferrara's prestige and her own standing. This cultural influence was a deliberate strategy, a means to assert power and legitimacy through beauty and intellect rather than force alone. Politically, Lucrezia evolved into a savvy diplomat and mediator, navigating the intricate web of Italian alliances with skill and grace. Her correspondence reveals a woman deeply engaged in statecraft, leveraging her unique position as a bridge between the papal authority of her birth family and the noble Este dynasty she came to represent. Through negotiation and alliance building, she carved a space for herself as a political actor in a milieu that often relegated women to the margins. Yet, Lucrezia's legacy is not without its contradictions. She remained tethered to the Borgia name, a family whose history was as much defined by ambition and ruthlessness as by patronage and piety. The duality of her identity, as both a daughter of a notorious papal house and a Duchess of Ferrara, imbued her life with complexity and tension. Her efforts to distance herself from the darker aspects of her family's reputation were balanced by her recognition that her lineage afforded her opportunities and influence otherwise unattainable. The personal costs of her public life were profound. Lucrezia bore the pressures of court intrigue, the responsibilities of motherhood, and the demands of political alliance with a grace that belied the vulnerabilities beneath. Her marriages, while strategic, also shaped her personal narrative, a tapestry of loss, endurance, and transformation. The public consummation of her marriage to Alfonso d'Este, a moment of profound humiliation, was reclaimed over time as a symbol not of victimhood, but of survival and assertion. In Ferrara, Lucrezia's patronage extended beyond mere aesthetics. It was a vehicle for forging identity and power. The artists and thinkers she supported contributed to a cultural renaissance that redefined the city's status and her own place within it. Her salons became hubs of intellectual discourse and political negotiation, spaces where gendered constraints were subtly challenged and negotiated. Through culture, she wielded influence that rivaled that of her male counterparts, asserting a form of power that was as enduring as it was sophisticated. The Duchess's role as a mother further cemented her legacy. The children she bore to Alfonso d'Este were not only heirs to a dynasty, but also living embodiments of the alliance between two powerful houses. Through their education and marriages, Lucrezia extended her influence into successive generations, ensuring that her impact would resonate long after her own time. Her maternal role was thus inseparable from her political and cultural ambitions, a fusion of personal devotion and dynastic strategy. Over time, the harsh judgments and sensationalist stories that once defined Lucrezia's public image softened, giving way to a more balanced understanding of her life and achievements. Historians and chroniclers began to recognize the depth of her resilience, the sophistication of her political engagement, and the significance of her cultural patronage. She emerged as a figure emblematic of the Renaissance's complexities, a woman navigating the treacherous intersections of gender, power, and family legacy with remarkable skill. Lucrezia Borgia's story is a testament to the transformative power of resilience and agency in a world where personal and political realms were inextricably linked. Her life illustrates how the intimate experiences that once humiliated her, the public consummation, the scandals, the betrayals, were reframed into sources of strength and legitimacy. She transcended the role of a mere pawn, becoming a duchess who shaped her destiny and left an indelible mark on history. Her legacy endures not simply in the annals of political intrigue or scandal, but in the cultural and diplomatic achievements she fostered. The courts of Ferrara, enriched by her patronage, stand as monuments to her vision and tenacity. Through her art, correspondence, and the alliances she forged, Lucrezia redefined what it meant to be a woman of power in Renaissance Italy, challenging the constraints of her time and expanding the possibilities for those who followed. In reflecting on Lucrezia Borgia's life, one sees a narrative that transcends simple categorization. She was a woman of contradictions, both victim and victor, scandalized and celebrated, constrained and commanding. Her journey from the shadows of public humiliation to the heights of duchess and patron reveals the intricate dance of survival and influence that defined the Renaissance. It is a story of transformation, where the personal became political, and where resilience carved a path through the tumultuous currents of history. Ultimately, Lucrezia Borgia's story invites us to reconsider the interplay of power, gender, and legacy. It challenges us to look beyond the sensationalism and to recognize the complex humanity behind the legend. Her life serves as a reminder that even in the most constrained circumstances, agency and dignity can be reclaimed, and that the legacies we inherit are not fixed, but can be rewritten through courage and intelligence. In the enduring echoes of Ferrara's court and the pages of history, Lucrezia's legacy shines, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a woman who turned humiliation into strength and scandal into sovereignty.